What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and I am alone. This is a Christmas special. I've got some notes here. You can probably hear those tackling around. Now, this is actually going to be my Patreon show for this quarter. I put out the poll as to what could be put on this episode, and there's a couple of things. But what came back was my top 5 alternative Christmas movies. So I thought, alright, we're going to go back. I'm going to do a bit of a countdown, top of the pop style, so we'll get to the Christmas number 1. But then I also thought, well, if I'm doing my alternative movies, I should probably also be doing the actual Christmas movies. So I thought I'll be doing that at the beginning. So we'll start with that as well. We'll give it some a bit of festive cheer, if you will. But more than that, I actually hadn't thought about when I was doing this. There's always a bit of contention about what is a Christmas film. What denotes or what defines a Christmas film? There's obvious ones, you know. You watch certain films and you're like, well, that is definitely a Christmas film. I think, like, you know, some of the ones on the list are definitely Christmas films. Others become a little bit more contentious, and we'll get to that as well. So what I wanted to do was to define 3 rules that I could work by. And if I can apply these rules as tenuously as possible to some of these films, then I would say that it was possible for it to be considered a Christmas film. So those 3 rules, so let's get into it from the off. The first rule: the story is impacted by the events having taken place at Christmas. So at first I thought it has to take place at Christmas, and a lot of these films don't have to take place at Christmas at all. You could easily transpose, even the proper Christmas films, you could transpose to another part of the year. But the events having taken place at Christmas has a special impact, so Christmas has to play a part in it that way. A lesson must be learned that makes someone in the film a better person, and I did an addendum to this, based on Xmas values. And this came from a friend of mine, Matt, who had this idea that should be based around Christmas values. So, you know, they learn a lesson around family or generosity or selflessness and, you know, the love of all mankind and all that kind of stuff. So it's generally around that thing. And the third rule is the positivity of Christmas iconography must play a part in the story, or at least in the film. So again, at first I had the positivity of Christmas must play a part, but that was too nebulous and a bit too, I don't know, hard to pin down. I couldn't really sort of make that fit across all the films, not even the Christmas films, to be perfectly honest. So, but the positivity of Christmas iconography. So this is symbolism that represents Christmas. Easy one, Santa Claus. Other ones, you know, like jingle bells or like reindeer and snow and presents and ribbons and decorations and tinsels and cake and all these other things that sort of represent Christmas in specific ways. Do they have an impact for a positive impact on the story? So those are the 3 rules, okay? So having gone through those rules, let's start with my top 5 normal Christmas films. And I'll work backwards because I have them in an order. And actually this order might surprise people, actually. Just this list may surprise you. And let's see what you think. So my number 5, and this is, you know, a lot of this is due to nostalgia and other things, but my number 5 is The Santa Claus from 1994, the Tim Allen film. And that's the first part of this. Like, when I was younger, I really liked Home Improvement, and obviously we then had him as Buzz Lightyear. So Tim Allen in the mid-90s, height of his game. This is, you know, height of his powers, Tim Allen. And it's a particularly Christmassy story. I assume you've seen it, but spoilers ahead because I'm going to talk about pretty much all of these films. The simple story is that he is a divorcee, father of one. And then one Christmas Eve, whilst his son is staying with him, they hear a clatter outside, and when they go to investigate, they find a ladder up to their roof, and they accidentally kill Santa. And from that, comedy ensues. But part of it is, if you are the one that picks up the suit, you take on the mantle of Santa Claus. So for the next 12 months, Scott Calvin has to bring his affairs into order, unprepared to become Santa Claus, and deal with the repercussions of that, especially on his family and his work. Now, the film itself is good fun. I really do love this film. The film's good fun. Tim Allen's excellent in it. The cast are really good. Bernard, the chief elf, who I've seen, there was a program called Numbers. I forget the guy's name, but he was in that. He's pretty good. And they have kids playing elves, and they've got some good jokes and that stuff in it. It's almost a Disney film, so it's very wholesome and has issues, though. I will say it has some issues. At the end of the film, he technically kidnaps his son and is chased down by the police and seems to be forgiven simply because he becomes Santa. And I'm not sure that would stand up in court. But I do like this idea. Like, he's a corporate toy maker. He works for, technically it could be like Hasbro or Mattel or any other large toy making firm. And it's that transposition of working from a corporate thing to becoming just this generous, fat, jolly guy who actually gives and makes presents in the workshop. And it's this seems to be a bit of a thing, not just for this 5, as in my proper films, but in the alternative 5 as well. This sort of indictment of capitalism, which is bizarre, because that's what drives Christmas. But the Christmas movies are like, it's not all about the presents, but don't forget to go out and buy presents. So it's a bit silly, but yeah, it's a definite indictment of corporate toy making in the film. Again, there's this idea of coming to terms with changes in your life. I mean, the whole film is about change. He's coming to terms with the fact his wife has moved on. She's married somebody else. His son has another male role model, and all these bits and pieces. And it's almost like you could see it as a midlife crisis story. In many ways, he's trying to deal with this stuff. So, it has those sort of connotations as well, especially with the weight gain and the white hair and all this kind of thing. So, but the Santa transformation as well. Like when he fully turns into Santa, like it's a proper good Santa look. It really suits him. The things to sort of learn in this film, or the other thing to note in this film, I mean, it's all comedy. You have like farting reindeer and special forces elves that use tinsel to break people out of cells, that sort of thing. But the fact is that this film includes a scene where a Santa, right, and a Santa, because obviously it's about legacy, which is again something else that seems to come up in these films. A Santa dies and somebody takes over. But you still see a Santa die. And the question I have in this is sort of like, does Santa actually die? Like, is this one of those things where, like, if you were to know the full story, like, could there be the Santa Claus, redemption, or the Santa Claus reboot, where it's Tim Allen that's got to die? And it's like, well, you actually have just spent your time, you've done your time as Santa, so tonight is the night, like, you've got to pass it on tonight. So it was almost bound to happen, so he set it up. Because the Santa, like, just before he disappears, like, he waves. He's almost like, I'm done. So that's an interesting thing. But the other thing about this film is the lessons. So if we go through the rules as well. So the story is impacted by the events taking place at Christmas. Well, he turns into Santa, so yeah, it's got to have happened at Santa. If it hadn't have happened at Christmas, he wouldn't have killed Santa. It wouldn't have happened. So it's 12 month. This film covers a 12-month period. Starting and ending at Christmas. A lesson must be learned that makes someone in the film a better person. Well, he definitely does that, especially around the Christmas values. He becomes Santa. He becomes more understanding, with kids, and more generous with his time, and less selfish. And so, yeah, he becomes that personification of what Santa should be. The positive Christmas iconography must play a part in this story. Well, you can't escape the fact that he's definitely, firstly, he becomes Santa. But the positivity comes from him literally taking that mantle on. The suit, in particular, the sleigh, is all really important to this figure, this construct that becomes Santa. So I definitely think, number 5, definitely a Christmas film. Can't be beat. Number 4, can we count then? So number 4, 2011, Arthur Christmas, animated film. I saw this in an independent, small cinema, tiny cinema it was, called the Kinema in the Woods in Lincolnshire, and it was absolutely awesome. So, what do I like this film? Well, firstly, this film is just lovely. It's one of those things with Christmas films. It's sort of like, you can analyse them and pick them apart, but it seems a bit pointless because the whole point of them is it's just lovely. It's a lovely story. Arthur is the son of Santa, one of two. One is clearly the up and coming. Again, this has got legacy. Like, there's Grandpa Santa, there's Santa, and there's the young Santas, and one of them is Arthur, who's a bit of a dimwit. And the other one, played by Hugh Laurie, is the up and coming. He's actually taking on the mantle of Father Christmas in the future. And again, this is an indictment of corporate America, or even just corporations and the corporate world. And this thing of we need to get back to a simpler way of doing things, not going backwards, because it clearly highlights in the film that there's Grandpa Santa who's nuts, and voiced by the excellent Bill Nighy. It goes back to something. Don't go backwards, but maintain an essence that's always there. And so you have the sort of the Hugh Laurie pain in the ass kind of Santa wannabe who's got this massive flying this is ship. It's basically a UFO with a reflective surface on the bottom, or you can't see it, becomes invisible, and all the elves come down and do the delivery rather than Santa, and all these other bits and pieces. But it's all about the technology, and one child is missed. But instead of it being identified as a single child, it's done on a percentage, and it's like, well, it's within the accepted parameters of failure. You're just like, oh man, this is like working in corporations. I can tell you. But Arthur will not accept that. He sort of sorts the letters out. He won't accept any child being missed, and so he finds the present, or at least the present sort of drops in his lap actually, and he goes on a mission to deliver this single present, and in doing so, reminds his brother and his father, the Father Christmas, the meaning of Christmas, what they're there for. It's not about being loved. It's about giving, and about sort of making sure that every child feels loved. And it's again, the animation is great. The voice cast, I should say, the voice cast in this film as well. You've got firstly Imelda Staunton, who's going to go on to play Queen Elizabeth in the next season of The Crown, and also known as the evil female teacher in Harry Potter films. Forget her name. Jim Broadbent, always national treasure. Jim Broadbent, Hugh Laurie, Bill Nighy, and James McAvoy as Arthur, and it's just a simple story. But again, it's sort of like, it's animated, so you're able to get silly things in there. They've got a sidekick elf who's able to wrap any presents with 3 pieces of tape, and that sort of thing. And I forget the woman who voiced her, but I've seen her on other things. All really good, all solid stuff. This film, I would say. So Arthur Christmas, 2021. Now let's have a quick look, go through the rules. The story is impacted by the events taking place at Christmas. Of course, it's about delivering a present on Christmas by the son of Santa. A lesson must be learnt that makes someone in the film a better place. The only person who doesn't learn a lesson in this film is Arthur, because he already knows it. It's everybody else. Everybody else in this thing learns this idea of not about, you don't have to be loved. It's about making sure everybody else feels loved because of what you're doing, and that everybody is important. It's not just a statistic. The positivity of Christmas iconography must play a part in the story. Well, again, he's Santa. But also, throughout the film, there's this notion... there's a little bit where Arthur's at his lowest, and he's about to give up. And they give a story, and you see these things about the reindeer and stuff, and it inspires him again that he's got to complete the mission. And it works really, really well. It's just got everything you need. So I really do think this is a good film, and especially for kids. It's one of those sort of it's You, I think, but definitely worth checking out. Okay, so that's number 4. So number 3. Now then you get to the 3 now, and the 3 is interesting because it's all a bit like, depending on which way. Thank you for that. Whichever way the wind's blowing, these may change. But number 3, I'm going to start with It's a Wonderful Life, the 1946 movie with Jimmy Stewart. And if you haven't seen this, because this is one of those ones that gets talked about a lot, but I'm not entirely sure it gets watched as much as it gets talked about. You know, everybody seems to sort of talk about it. That yes, I've seen It's a Wonderful Life, and it gets parodied a number of times. You know, this idea of, you know, I wish I wasn't born. If I wasn't born, you know, that'll teach them a lesson. Sort of like, you see how the world is if you hadn't been there to live your life, and the impact that your life had on the world. Outright, I'll let you know now, this film makes me weep like a baby towards the end. Like, it's just such a brilliantly positive ending. Like, if you're feeling down, like, you watch the end of this film, or you just watch the film and then you get to the ending, it's phenomenal. Like, it's a really, like, you know, heartwarming, wholesome. I mean, it's a bit cliche these days, but that's the point. This was one of the originals. But more than that, like, James Stewart in this film is ace. Again, I've always liked James Stewart in many films, but this is one of those films where you get to see his range as an actor. Like, he plays George Bailey through different ages, you know, from sort of like an early teen or late teen, early 20s through to a middle-aged man with a family. And George Bailey, again, is sort of like, he's such an aspirational character. He's a bit like Arthur Christmas, you know, in that way that he just does instinctively, sort of like, just does the right thing. He makes the right choices, even when temptation sort of is there in the form of whether it be Mr. Potter or some other things. The opportunity to travel around the world, like, he will give up his savings to give to somebody else to make sure they survive. Like, the good example, one of the great films is he gets married, and they're about to go on their honeymoon, and they find that because his uncle has lost some money, quite a lot of money actually, they use their honeymoon savings to cover the bank, the Bailey Loans, saving and loans, and in doing so, like, can't go away. Like, that's it. He's tied to this bank and all this other stuff, and covers everybody's thing when they think that there's going to be a run on the banks, and so, you know, he just does the right thing. There's a character in this film who's never forget now, which is, you know, the attractive girl, and she's meant to be seen as a bit of a, not slut's probably the wrong word, but like she's a little bit of a, you know, a bit more opportunistic, and so, but he never gives into it. But when she does hit hard times, like, George is the person that gives her the opportunity to do better, to get out of town and do what she needs to do. And at no point is it seen as like him hitting on her, or there's nothing sleazy there. It's just George doing what he feels is the right thing to do. If anything, like, he's the post-war personification of the American dream. Like, this is what a person should be like. He stands up for his family, he stands up for his community, and he stands up for his country, even when the circumstances dictate. Like, George isn't able to go to war because he saved his brother from falling into the ice when they were younger, and in doing so, is deaf in one ear. So he almost sacrificed himself to save his brother, but it saved him from going to war. But he still joins, like, you know, the home front and does all these other things with raising money and other bits and pieces. So, you know, George is this great character, but I also find that his frustration and his just constant sort of browbeating, the way life sort of, you know, he keeps handing him things, is so relatable and so sort of like just honest that, yeah, life can do that. There are times when you can be the best person in the room and life is still going to serve you a plate of shit, but he's still going to stand up and he's still going to take it. And the moment at the end of that film when you think he's done for, like, after everything he's done, when his brother has lost the money. Sorry, it's not his brother's uncle. So he covered it when there's a rush on the banks, but his uncle loses this $8 grand, and Mr. Potter keeps it and hides it, and it's going to be done for fraud, because they think, like, if you can't account for it, then you've probably stolen it. He thinks he's going to go to prison, which is why he intends to kill himself, because he thinks, well, if I can kill myself, I have a life insurance, and that will cover everything, and everyone will be okay, and people will be better off without me. So to be sent to that, but then when he obviously gets back, and it's not just seeing what the world is like without him. That's the part that everyone sort of remembers, that everyone parodies. This notion of what the world is without you, and there's some great turn-ups, because one of the just these instances, and it makes you think about what you've done in your life and how you've done things. And one of the things is that when he was a kid, he worked at the chemist, and the chemist was issuing some drugs, and he miscalculated. Like, the chemist miscalculates the dosage. No, he doesn't. He misses the bottle entirely. Actually, puts poison into these medicine capsules, and George catches it and stops him from issuing them. In doing so, obviously saves somebody's life. In the world that George didn't live, or actually he dies in the lake when he saves his brother, those pills go out. And so they do kill someone, and that chemist loses his job, loses his shop, and becomes what they call a rummy. Get out of here, you rummy! He's a drunk on the streets. He spent time in a psychiatric hospital, but when you realise that the only reason he put the wrong medicine in, or he put the poison in, was because he was so distraught because he found out his son had died, and so in his grief he made an error. We could all do it. It's it happens, but that George wasn't there to help it, and it goes on and on. It's a great little story of how things are different when you finally see it. But I also like the fact you see his entire life. Like, this film is a saga, but the bit for me, more than that, I get choked up if I'm talking about it. But the thing is when he does get home, and his family, I'm mentioning his daughter. One of his daughters is there, and he picks her up and that other stuff, and you think he's done for, and that the auditor turns up and says, like, basically with the coppers. Turns up with the police, and you think he's done for, or at least he thinks he's done for. And then the town turns up, the town turns up and has the money for him, and pays it out. And that's it, he's saved, the bank saved, George's life is paid off. So, does it fit into the rules? We're going to get to that point now. So, the story is impacted by the events taking place at Christmas. So it's the lead up to... It's not actually Christmas, it's the lead up to Christmas when the events happen, because it's the bank is taking in end of year savings. That's what they've lost. And so, is it impacted by it at Christmas? Yes and no. It has more of an impact. I suppose this film, the events of this film travel throughout his life, but it's bookended by being at Christmas. And so I think it's more impactful for George. If it was in the summer, he may have taken a different turn, but it's that thing of saving his family at Christmas. So I believe so. I think that's very true. A lesson must be learned that makes someone in the film a better person. There's less of a lesson and more of a revelation, which is an understanding. It's still someone's idea. It's still what they know. But it's the revelation for him that actually this small life that he believes he's led matters. And that's the lesson you should take from this film. You watch this film, you realise that you have an impact on other people. Like, it can be as simple as, helping someone out in a moment of strife or whatever. But in that moment, you don't know what it is that the impact of that moment is on them, the ripple effect. And that's what you see throughout this film. So, I could go on and on about this film, but, the other thing to note really is, the other thing as well is, this film was made in 1946, and, so it's post-war era, America, so that they are coming off the high of the war. But George is he's almost like a liberal progressive. He sort of stands up for the little man. Like, this was what, again, I said the American dream. This guy personifies truth, justice, and the American way. Literally, that's what he's for. And again, this anti-capitalism thing runs again in this idea of Mr. Potter, like Mr. Potter, who runs the bank, the big bank, and he's also a property owner in town, runs the town, owns the town, and George is the little man standing up for him. Like, this is the personification of, I wouldn't even say the Democrats, but like this progressive Labour, liberal idealism of, like, how communities again should be supported, and should the little people. It sounds terrible to say that, but the less fortunate should look after each other and stand as a community. Like, that's a big part of this film, because George is the main character, but you have a community throughout this film. Like, the reason that when he isn't born and you see that world pays off is because you've created these relationships through in this community around him. So yeah, people learn a lesson in this film, but I think even as a viewer you learn a lesson. The positivity of Christmas. The positivity of Christmas iconography must play a part in the film. The end of the film with the tree, I suppose, is the main bit, because he gets given the opportunity to sort of pay the money back, and the phrase is, what is it? So the bell rings. So every time a bell rings, an angel gets their wings. And Clarence, the angel that sort of saved him, gets his wings. So I definitely think that tree is there, and it forms a part because the tree is on the bell is on the tree, and that's a key part of this. The recognition of Clarence and the work he's done. So yeah, It's a Wonderful Life. Such a good film. Number 3. There's a reason it's number 3. It's probably more like nostalgia. I didn't watch It's a Wonderful Life till quite recently, actually, probably the last sort of 7 years. But it's now a tradition. Every Christmas we watch that film. Fantastic. So, number 2. Compose myself. Number 2 is actually Home Alone 2. So why isn't Home Alone on this list, but Home Alone 2 is? Well, I honestly think that Home Alone 2 is a better film. Home Alone 1 is a reactive film. It's a good film. It's a fun film. The McAllister home being invaded, the defence, young Macaulay Culkin doing all those bits and pieces. Really good. I mean, it stands up as a film. It's no wonder that it's one of the most successful, financially successful films of Chris Columbus's and career, who obviously directed it. But the thing is with it is it's a reactive film, and yes, you can apply all those rules to it. Definitely apply all the rules to it. But I don't know. There's just something that with 2, although it's meant to be a year later, Kevin McAllister feels like a much more well-rounded character. But even more than that, he has a morality. Like, the morality in the first one is almost sinister. Like, there's a scene where he obviously acknowledges that he's got to protect his home. This is my castle and I have to protect it, sort of thing. And I get that, and sets up the traps. But it's almost like he gets an enjoyment out of causing pain. He does in the second one as well, but the second one is run on this fact of the second half of the film, or at least the sort of the third act, is an acknowledgement that something bad is going to happen. In this case, it's toy store is going to be robbed by Marv and Harry, stealing all the money from the kids' hospital. That's he takes the savings or the money he's made in profit, and then he gives it to the children's hospital, and that's going to be stolen. And in this case, sort of, instead of being a defensive, he almost goes on the offense. Knowing the right thing to do is to stop them and to bring them to justice in the only way he knows, and then he forms his diabolical plan. But it's the fact that the film takes that swing towards the end, because you get the rest of it is all the first part is pretty much a replay of Home Alone 1. It just transposed the home to a hotel. You even get sort of like was it the Angels with Dirty Faces, or whatever, the gangster flicks, being used, and the silhouette of something in the shower and all this other stuff, and it's all used, and it's all very similar. It's all very good. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think the cast in this are good. Tim Curry is absolutely excellent as like the head concierge or whatever, the hotel manager, and his reactions in this film are like he is comedy gold in this film. At the moment, he really mimics the Grinch with his big grin when he finds out it's a stolen credit card. To when they think they're getting shot at later on at one point. But one of my favourites is when Kevin's family turn up and his mum, Catherine O'Hara, turns up and you know, she makes a point of she's going out to look for Kevin in the streets because he's been chased away from the hotel. And Tim Curry's like, but madam, you can't go outside. There's thieves and hooligans, everything out there. You know, obviously compounding the fact that Kevin's out there on the streets, and she slaps him, and his reaction to the wobbling lip, and he says, you know, wrap up warm, madam, and can't look anyone in the face is spot on. It's so well done. The timing is perfect. It's one of my favourite sort of moments in the film. But it as a Christmas film, it works better for me than the first one, because the first film is obviously is centred around the sort of the comedy of that house invasion, but it's about being invaded. Like, there's nothing there driving it other than they're away. Everyone gets away for Christmas. But the second one, like I said, you get to see New York at Christmas, so you get to see the Christmas tree, like the Rockefeller tree and all that kind of jazz, and all that's great. But it's about also the other thing I find more interesting is from the second film to the first film. The second film has a more mature message. The first film, you meet the old guy next door with the beard, scary old guy, and you find out he doesn't talk to his son and he doesn't get to see his granddaughter and all this other stuff. And then they reconcile at the end. Like, you don't understand the gist of it, but there's a reconciliation that Kevin witnesses. So it's all very nice. But the second one, you meet the bird lady in the park, and she sort of, you know, gives him this understanding that not everything works out well. You know, not everything works out fantastically. So she takes him to like the orchestra. She gets to see the orchestra play, and all that's wonderful. And she's like, you know, oh, I'll remember you. And she's like, don't make promises you can't keep. Like, she's got a broken life. Like, you find out she had a family, or she didn't have kids, but she was married, and she had a job, and choices were made that put her in that position. Like, you don't know what they are, doesn't matter. But it's not like, you know, and that's part of the point. Like, it doesn't matter. She's just taken that's the road that life has taken her down, and it's never going to be reconciled. It's never going to be sorted out. Like, she doesn't go off and join a shelter and get a job and find a man. No, the end of the film is just that she has a friend. That's it. Like, he goes back, he gets those turtle doves, and he goes and gives her one at the end. It's an acknowledgement that she will be remembered, and that she is important, and she isn't ignored. And it's this idea that, like, you know, people will live on the streets. Like, she's still living on the streets in the cold. You know, she's still the crazy bird lady at the end of the film. Like, she doesn't change her status. And I just find that more interesting, and a little bit more mature, that not everything can be resolved by a 9-year-old and their you know, acts of violence. So that's always interesting. I also like the fact that the finale in this film is, I think, better. Played better. The stunts are incredible. And some of the hits, like, you know, I know it's all makeup and make-believe, but some of the hits that Marv gets when he gets hit in the face with brick after brick after brick is awesome. Makes me cringe. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Peak Macaulay Culkin. I think he's actually really good in this film. I always wonder, like, you know, you see him now, and he's obviously had a tough life, but, you know, it's always weirder when you see him as a kid and you think, like, you know, that's when you were a megastar. But yeah, Home Alone 2. I'm going to finish it there. Like, is it a Christmas film? The story is impacted by it being at Christmas. Well, yeah, totally. You know, that's when they're taking the journey, but also the whole thing of, like, Marv and that being, like, if it didn't take place at Christmas, he wouldn't be able to defend the stolen money and so on and so forth. A lesson must be learned that makes someone film a better person. Well, they basically learn the same lesson as the first film, about being, you know, your family and all this other stuff, blah, blah, blah. Positivity of Christmas iconography must play a part in the family. But the whole thing is about the Rockefeller tree. It's about Christmas trees. Like, they don't want to go to, the family's going to Florida, and Kevin doesn't want to, because he wants to go somewhere with Christmas trees. And he gets to see one, and that's where he reconciles with his mum at the end of the film. So, 3 rules, 3 for 3. Easy at Christmas film. So these are getting easier and easier. So what is my number 1? Well, one of the things you haven't heard on the list yet is A Christmas Carol. So, am I going to give you A Christmas Carol? Well, yes, sort of. It could have been A Muppets Christmas Carol, which I do like and probably would be in my top 10, but it's not my favourite adaptation. And the reason for that is because, having read the story of A Christmas Carol, The Christmas Carol is a ghost story. It's not even not a nice one. Pardon me. Christmas Carol has been taken numerous times now and adapted, and you know they focus on the ghosts are always there. You know, Marley and the three ghosts, past, present, and future, and the lessons are always learned. It's always the same kind of thing, but in many cases, it's usually played to be light-hearted, or you know, it ends up being played for joviality. You know, not so much humour, but there's a jovial tone to it. Even Scrooge, you know, as a grump, is played as a sort of like, you know, comedic drama, a grump, that sort of thing. And whilst I enjoy A Muppet's Christmas Carol, it's never going to be like horrific. I think it does focus on it does focus on the emotionality of things. Like, you know, you get to see Scrooge's relationship with his ex-partner and this other stuff. Not his ex-partner in Marley, but in his girlfriend and potential wife, and what he left behind. And it's all good. The puppets are great, the songs are great, and it's you know, it's played for laughs for the most part. But there's a film that doesn't do that. It does play for laughs, but it brings in a real dose of cynicism and horror that I think gets missed, and that is 1988's Scrooged, starring Bill Murray as Alex Cross, the sort of head of a network, or the president of a network, and he's just again it's this anti sort of corporate message that keeps coming through in these Christmas films, which is bizarre. But he's a tosspot. Let's be honest, the guy's a tosspot, and you get the whole thing of how mean he is. Like, you know, you see at the very start, like the things he's putting on TV, like the night the reindeer died, when Lee Majors is going to save Santa and the elves, or the advert he's got ready for his version of A Christmas Carol. It's called Scrooge. That's going to go live, and it's all violent and dark, and it's like, you know, this is what's the true meaning of Christmas. So you get all that, and you get to see him, how he interacts with people, and he is a vile person. Like, he's a complete ass. Like, he fires Elliot Loudermilk, played by Bobcat Goldthwait, brilliant again, and you know, it's played for laughs. It's funny. His interactions with, like, Bill Murray. Like, I'm sure that this was ad libbed and all this other stuff. He's like anarchic and a bit crazy. But the moment this switches up, the moment it sort of like it steps up a gear, is the moment that his Marley returns, and it's this version of Marley is his old boss that sort of brought him up in the business when he was younger, the old network chief. And again, it's sort of played for laughs. Like, you know, you have a golf ball come out the back of the guy's head. There's a mouse there. When Bill Murray shoots him, and the drink spurts out of him. So it's a bit Beetlejuicy in that effect. But then it goes straight for horror. Like the makeup, like, they're not messing. This guy looks like a rotted corpse, and he's angry. Like, he's saying, like, you know, you could be just as bad as this. Like, I'm stuck on Earth in this terrible place, and then grabbing Alex Cross, Bill Murray, and forcing him through the window. Like, I love it, like mold. It doesn't shatter, it just molds around him, and then he grabbing onto his former boss's arm. The flesh, the decayed, mummified flesh breaks away, and then the bone snaps, and he thinks he's going to fall whilst his boss laughs maniacally. It's almost like a pure horror. I mean, you know, this is a horror comedy, comedy horror maybe. I don't know which way it'd be, but that reminds me of like House, or even Beetlejuice to some extent. And it maintains that darker tone throughout. I mean, you know, you get to see the Ghost of Christmas Past. Like, you know, it's probably the least scary, the least sort of creepy. But you do get to see like how harsh his life was. Again, you know, this idea of him being poor, and you know how bad his father was, and all those things. Like, they don't hold back. There's no sort of, you know, it makes him the victim, which is the point. But you sort of see why. But then you see the joy, the counter that showing the joy of when he meets Claire, played by Christ. I have to remember that. I've gone back to that. But yeah, you know, they have that great sort of dynamic. But then they also see, like, when she goes to the present, like, you met Claire and she works at a homeless shelter, so you meet these homeless guys, this group, this little troop of homeless people, again living in New York, so probably know the Bird Lady. And then you meet one of them that's died later on when the Ghost of Christmas Present moment is over. It's in that, like, when I see a lot of Christmas Carol adaptations, the change in Scrooge comes quickly. It comes at certain moments, but it sort of just seems to happen like that. A lot of the times they sort of place it on the Ghost of Christmas Future, and it always makes Scrooge seem like a bit of a dick, because he's like, oh, I don't want to die, so I'll sort myself out. There's others that sort of bring it forward, and the Ghost of Christmas Present probably has a bit more of an influence. Like, it sort of happens, less gradual. But with this, there's sort of like they constantly play things up. Like, Bill Murray seems to play it really well, of bouncing between remorse and remembrance and nostalgia, and then back to his sort of sarky, vile self. And that balance, or that bouncing, is what sort of makes him incredibly fascinating to watch throughout this, because he gets to see, like, again, it's a bit like the anti. We say this, it's sort of like the anti It's a Wonderful Life. Like, that's the whole point of Wonderful Life. It's something like the reverse of Christmas Carol. In that, like, without you around, like, this is the impact your life makes. Here's the things that you do. So, your secretary that's been around for you for years, you give her a towel. Like, she can't afford to take her son to a decent doctor, and like your brother, who clearly still wants to support you and know you and all this other stuff. Having said that, there's a weird thing in this film that I've never understood, and I'm always sure that there are deleted scenes or something that explain it more. But his brother is married to this lady, the woman, I forget her flaming name, what she's called in the film. But when it comes to the Ghost of Christmas Future, you see Alex Cross's death, or at least his funeral, and she's there. She's crying, she's got tears down her eyes. And then later on, when they have the he has the big climax back in the studio of the Scrooge event he's doing, he references her through the TV. Like, he talks to his brother, because he's obviously been there that evening, seen them partying and doing Trivial Pursuit, and they talk about the what boat took them to Gilligan's Island. It was the SS Minnow. And he says that, and they're all like, well, how did you know we're talking about that? But he also then references her, and her reaction indicates to me that they had a relationship, or there's something there that is unusual, but it's never mentioned or brought up in the rest of the film, so it's weird. But yeah, I just find this film, like I say, it maintains not just the horror, because when it needs horror, it gives horror. Like, the Ghost of Christmas Future is closer to the book, in that idea that in the book, beneath the shroud of the Ghost of Christmas Future, you meet these two figures, these two shriveled children, and they represent desperation and hunger, or something like that. And there's an allusion to that in this film. Like, he opens up the cloak, and there's these figures inside the coat. So, you've got the horror there, but they maintain, and the cynicism all the way through to the end, really. But then they let Bill Murray loose. Frank Cross, because Alex Cross, that's a completely different franchise. Frank Cross. And he's able to sort of sell his redemption for about 8 to 9 minutes at the end of this film. It's just pure Bill Murray joy. And he's still got that sarky sense of humour and stuff, but it works so well. So, does it work as a adaptation of Christmas Carol? God, yes. You've got the Cratchit stand-ins in Grace and her family, the Cooleys. That's it, Grace Cooley. Elliot Loudermilk, also sort of a Cratchit-esque stands-in, and then Claire stands obviously for the lost love, and everything else. So it's perfect. This is such a perfect Christmas film for me, because it maintains that level of darkness that other films don't always have at this time of year. So that was just quickly my 5 Christmas films. I'm going to quickly jump straight away onto my 5 alternate Christmas films. Now, this is going to be a quick list. Well, not a quick list, we'll still talk, but let's just get straight into it. So at number 5 of my alternates, an absolute joy of a film, an absolute madness of a film, Bill Goldberg, the wrestler Bill Goldberg, playing Santa in Santa's Sleigh. So what's the story? Well, Santa isn't the jolly old fat man. He's actually the son of Satan, and 1,000 years ago, he lost a bet to an angel, and in losing that bet, he has to deliver presents to children for 1,000 years. And guess what? The 1,000 years are up in 2005, and so he is coming back for revenge. So he comes back to the small town looking for the angel that he lost the bet to, and in doing so, basically goes on an absolute rampage in killing spree. It's not dark at all. It's violent, it's gory, but it's played up for laughs. I mean, the opening scene of this film is you can find it on YouTube. Like if you haven't seen this film, just go and put Bill Goldberg or Santa's Sleigh opening scene. It's on YouTube, and it's great. It's a family of, again, comes to this sort of this rich thing about sort of, suppose it's about going against the true meaning of Christmas, and they're rich and they're lording it up, and they're clearly like not particularly nice people. And then he comes in and just basically beats them all up and kills them. But it's hilarious, absolutely hilarious, and it's just so left field throughout it. Like, it also taps into other ideals of Christmas. Like, he doesn't have the reindeer; he's got a big bison, which I think is maybe like some of the Nordic version of the, and it just looks cool. It's really good, and Bill Goldberg is huge. He's a big dude. But let's just put it against the rules. So let me get the rules out. So we've got the 3 rules. The story is impacted by the events taking place at Christmas. Yes, it has to. Like, this version of Santa has decided to take his revenge on Christmas. That's what he's going to do after the 1,000 years. So it has to take place on Christmas, and it is impacted by doing so because he is Santa. A lesson must be learnt that makes someone in the film a better person. So one of the main protagonists in this film is a young lad who sort of becomes the final boy, almost, as it were, standing up to the Goldberg Santa, and he learns. It's a coming of age story in that respect. Like, he learns to stand up for himself. He learns that he can be a man is obviously not exactly the right way of putting it now, but he gains confidence. He asserts himself in a better way by the end of the film. So, and in doing so, he's able obviously to get on with his life. The positivity of a Christmas iconography plays a part. Well, they find the angel, and it's that typical thing of an angel at the top of the tree kind of deal, and it plays out. And also, they do use, I think there's like Christmas bazookas and all this other stuff, so the other Christmassy bits definitely occur. So Santa's Sleigh, 2005, definitely a Christmas film. Number four, this is a goodie, this is. So we're going for a comedy. I'm sticking with the comedies really in this bit. Office Christmas Party from 1992. It's definitely not 1992. It's more recent than that. Did I change those around? Office Christmas Party. Not sure. But Office Christmas Party. Quite recent. Probably like 2018 actually. 2016, 2017, something like that. Stars T.J. Miller, Jason Bateman, Jennifer Aniston, and Olivia Munn. And the idea is basically a branch of this company is about to get shut down, and the only way they can sort of save it is by winning an account, and in doing so they have to sort of like bring this guy to a massive Christmas party. Funnily enough, at the office. So it's the first Christmas party, Christmas office party on the list. It may not be the last. But could the film be structured for another time of the year? This is one of those things, really. No, it couldn't. The whole idea of this is it's the end of the year, end of the financial. They see it almost as the end of the financial years. They allude to that a little bit, not really, because obviously it ends in April. But and being Christmas, it puts everybody at the chance of redundancy. I think at Christmas, and that's obviously the worst time. So being Christmas is really important actually to this film. Last hurrah, as it were, was this Christmas party. All 3 of the main characters in this film learn a lesson through the actions. I mean, T.J. Miller doesn't learn the lesson he should have learned, but we'll get less about that. He's the sort of the slacker and the sort of the dimwit, and he's always had money to fall back on because it's his parents' company. And he learns responsibility. Like, he again sort of learns to stand up for himself, assert himself, and become a better boss. Or understands that he could be doing something better. Through doing these events. Jason Bateman is also like the stiff corporate backbone, always kept the other guy out of trouble, well, prison probably right, but he's the one that learns to become a bit more agile and a bit more accepting that life can throw you these sort of like sideballs that you're going to have to cope with and that sort of thing. And again, he ends up with Olivia Munn, which is bizarre. And Jennifer Aniston is the ruthless sort of like head office exec who's come in to sort of like sacrifice those people because they're not performing, or the branch isn't performing. So why would we sacrifice why would I sacrifice the greater good for this company? And softens. This film's all about softening and understanding that actually giving people a chance is the right. There's better ways of doing these things than coming in and just demanding that people do as they're told. So they're the lessons. I would just throw that in. So they're the lessons that are learnt in this film. So it's called Office Christmas Party. It is a Christmas film. It's fantastic. On top of all that, it's a riotous comedy. I love this film. It makes me laugh so much. There's some stupid stunts in this. It's that one of those sort of like crazy sort of like party films, Bad Neighbours, or even like back to Animal House or Porky's. It's sort of into that vein of things. And the cast in this film, like I say, I kind of like T.J. Miller, must admit, when he's funny. Jennifer Aniston is actually really good in this. Jason Bateman, I can take or leave, but this is when he was going through that sort of period of doing these sorts of comedies. This, Couples Retreat, was it not Date Night? Games Night, he's done all those, so yeah, he does them, but and he's alright. Olivia Munn's actually pretty good in this. I don't really can't consider her to be a very good actress. I think she's fine, but she's actually really good in this. The star in this for me, though, the one thing I'd come back to is Kate McKinnon. Kate McKinnon is an absolute legend. She is a comedy legend. In this film, she basically plays the slightly doolally sort of like cat lady, HR lady, who trying to keep everything PC, keep everybody happy, non-offensive. They call it a Christmas party. It's a non-denominational seasonal get-together. Things like that. So it's really funny. And so yeah, I do recommend this film actually. But the film is loaded with Christmas iconography, as you can imagine. Everything from Jesus appears in it with a reindeer and a donkey, and then there's a Santa riding a printer, and then everyone gets absolutely loaded and drunk. So it's a damn good film. Is Office Christmas Party. But those two were sort of like, I love them. I do. I watch this every year. They really make me laugh. They make me bring me up to seasonal joy, especially when everything else is a bit crap this year. So those I'm going to recommend as your entry points, your comedy entry points. Check those out. They'll make you chuckle. But we're leaving comedy and we're entering into another territory now. We're going to start entering into darker territory with Krampus from 2015. So Krampus is, as a character, or as a folklore, is the anti-Claus. He's the anti-Santa Claus, celebrated on Krampus night in Germany. I think it's Krampus night, something like that. December the 5th. And people dress up as Krampus, and they whip each other and do some other bits and pieces out in the streets. All a bit German. But it's cool. It looks really good fun. But Krampus is exactly this thing. The law is that if you're a bad child, he will, Santa might leave you a lump of coal, but Krampus will stuff you in a bag and then whip you with reeds. That's what. So he's an interesting character. He's a fascinating horror character, especially to do with folklore. But it's more about, again, this comes into this corporate, this idea of corporate greed and the commercialism of Christmas is in there. I mean, the opening of this film is people storming into a shop just to get the bargains and complete their Christmas shopping. And then it sort of falls into this sort of family. It starts almost like as a family comedy. You can imagine this being the start of like National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation or something like that. Like you have all the cliched family characters there. The dad that never comes away from work, the busy mum, the crazy gun-toting right-wing uncle, the drunk great aunt. The horrible cousins, like it's all there. It's an atypical sort of like Hollywood anti-family, if you will, and then sort of it then gets into why they're all it comes into them being the McAllisters or the McAllister family from Home Alone. Like there's a kid in there that really loves Christmas and really wants to celebrate it, but these horrible people sort of end up spoiling it by being a bunch of dicks, and so he sort of throws his Santa letter in the fire. So he's picked on for doing it and throws his Santa into the fire. Instead of it going to Santa Claus, it goes off to Krampus, and the Krampus comes to pay them a visit. So it's about the punishment of Christmas. It's about the punishment. what do you do if you aren't the person, you know, that's going to be all holly jolly when Santa arrives? Well, this is where it sort of gets into the darkness. Now, it comes into this idea of almost like a Christmas Carol. Like they are taught a lesson by going through a journey, like, you know, Dante's Inferno thing, sort of, if you will, where representations of Christmas, so this thing of coming into the iconography of Christmas, like it turns on them. These things that should bring you joy start to turn on them. So the first things first is snow. Like, you know, you're supposed to have this beautiful winter scene, see the lights and stuff. But what happens is that turns on them and they get snowed in. Trapped, can't go anywhere. So they lose their daughter in the snow. That plays later on. Then they are attacked by angry, carnivorous gingerbread cookies. A toy in the attic that tries to swallow a child, other toys, I think a doll that's face cracks open and there's a skull in it, all these different bits and pieces. Really, like, gets a bit dark, but it's really cool. These things that you would recognise as in other films, in other contexts, at the apex of sort of like typical traditional Christmas iconography. And they turn on them, and that's this punishment, that their house becomes under siege from Krampus and his helpers. And this film, the other thing about this film that's so cool is there's like an thing in the middle where you learn about the lore of Krampus from the good aunt, you know, like the good granny who's come from Eastern Europe, and sort of retells or regales this tale of the Krampus and when she was a child and how her entire village was killed apart from her by Krampus. So then obviously goes into the sort of the typical sort of horror things where they've got to get through each of these scenarios, and they get, you know, better and stronger by doing it, and they learn the lesson of, you know, respecting the family. But they all get taken on. And the thing is, there is a positivity at the end of this film, because the boy who believes in the spirit of Christmas does stand up to Krampus and shows, you know, some way of doing it. I think he has like a Christmas decoration and this other thing. So you'd think that is going to give them this happy ending, that yes, they've learnt the lesson, that this is going to be their turn, they'll have their Christmas Carol, Ebenezer Scrooge Christmas morning moment where they can all jump out of bed and say, you know, I'm alive, boy, go get me a turkey. No, none of it. They come downstairs and start opening the presents, and then they speculate on something because it feels wrong. And then there's a great moment when it pans out and you realise that they're actually trapped in a bauble that has been captured by the Krampus, and it, you know, they are there then trapped in that moment forever. And it's a punishing story. You know, it's supposed to be. That's exactly what it's supposed to be. You are supposed to go, yeah. It's not the happy ending I was expecting. It's not the sort of them going to go holly jolly unwrapping presents and hugging each other that they survived. Like, they don't survive. Spoilers, I told you that. But the lessons are learned. Like, it's clear they've learnt the lessons, but it's too late. And so really you take away from this thing of, like, you know, don't let it be too late. Take your time now to, you know, see your relatives and all that kind of thing. So let's apply the rules quickly on this one. The story is impacted by the events taking place at Christmas. Yes, this is Krampus coming for them. There is no other time of year that this could happen. It is literally about the spirit of Christmas. The lessons learnt make the people in this film a better person. Well, the boy obviously learns it, but they do learn it. Like, it shows it at the end. They have learnt the lesson. And they obviously are better people. It's just too late. The positivity of Christmas iconography must play a part in the story. Well, he does. The boy, when he stands up to Krampus at the end of the film, shows, I'm sure it's like a bell or like a bauble or something that represents like his love for Christmas, and how he believes in it and believes in Santa and believes in the true spirit of Christmas. It's not enough, but it's there. And obviously in the rest of it, I love the fact that they twist iconography. The whole thing's meant to be positivity at the end because they learn the lesson of joy. But there's a moment where the Jack in the Box becomes like a monster that tries to eat people. Like, that's awesome. So that's some of the Christmas iconography. So Krampus from 2015. Right, we're going to take a bit back. We're still going dark. Final two films now, and the two biggest. One of them probably more controversial than the other. Number 2 of my alternate Christmas movies is 1984's Gremlins. So, Gremlins. What do we know about Gremlins? Well, Gremlins, a Joe Dante film. It's produced by Steven Spielberg, so it's got all that sort of class of that early 90s, sort of all the big names. And a boy, late teen, early 20s, not really boy, young man, gets given a mogwai creature for a Christmas present from his dad, who's a travelling inventor. Comes with 3 rules: don't get it wet, don't feed it after midnight, don't put it in front of sunlight. And unfortunately, he gets it wet, it multiplies, and then those things get fed after midnight and they become gremlins. Okay, so craziness ensues. And the town of Kingston Falls gets pulled into a night of mayhem as these small, scaly creatures take over and start attacking people. So, yes, it is set at Christmas. I wanted to get into this because we talked about Scrooged being akin to It's a Wonderful Life in many ways, but I think Gremlins is probably more linked to It's a Wonderful Life than Scrooged, and I'll explain why. So, as we said in It's a Wonderful Life, when George Bailey is shown the life or the world that could have been without him, it's basically Kingston Falls. This is about this is sort of you don't get that alternate world reality, but you do get a glimpse of this thing where yes, so it's even in the names, there's homages all over the place. Like It's a Wonderful Life actually appears in the film, like his mum, Billy, Billy's mum is watching It's a Wonderful Life at one part in the film, so it's there throughout. It's there, they're telling you it's there. The place is called Kingston Falls. It's a Wonderful Life is in Bedford Falls, so not totally the same, but it's close enough. And I'll get onto the bits in a minute, but as we go through actually about this thing, because the other thing as well, I know. Actually, I'll flip this round. You're listening in. So Kingston Falls, the mum is watching it with someone else. Billy works at a saving and loans company. Billy in this film is supposed to be the George Bailey character, or at least he has the potential to become the George Bailey character. You see other people in this film that could be that thing in the town and don't. Like Judge Reinhold plays that smug git character and could have been the George Bailey character, but isn't. It's Billy. And so you do get this notion of if Billy had been given this opportunity, instead of looking down all the time and he could have looked up and been a kinder person, then maybe Kingston Falls would be in a better place. Mrs. Deagle, who basically she's awesome at the beginning, has a great death in the film, is the Mr. Potter. She owns the town, properties within the town, and there's no one there to stand up to it. This is there's the point when she confronts Billy in the bank. He backs down. And it's only a dog that tries to sort of jump on her, and she's, I have a weak heart. She's at the Mr. Potter, and you actually see there's a couple, or at least a woman with her kids, are about to be put on the street. That was heartbreaking. She's about to be put on the streets, and one of the kids says how hungry they are, and she says, "Yeah, me too, darling," and they walk on. So yeah, this is what it could have been. This is what Bedford Falls could have been without a George Bailey. And into that mix you then get thrown the Gremlins, which represent some of the worst vices of humanity, some of our worst vices. The bit in the pub scenes there is specifically for that point. You see gambling, you see smoking, you see drinking, you see carousing. I know that all that's bad, but that's the point, is that it's supposed to be representing that. They're violent, they're mischievous, they're willing to kill and attack, and so they're just the worst impulses of human nature. And so, that's just sort of this thing of again, it comes into this whole sort of anti-commercialism, anti-capitalism message, really, is a way to read this film. Is Billy gets given this gizmo. The kid who gives Gizmo to his dad is obviously just looking to make some money because they don't sell any of their crap. They've got to pay the rent, I suppose. And but it's about that thing of everything's for sale. If you've got enough money, you can buy anything, which is obviously the atypical thing of commercialism. But again, as we've said, this idea of Kingston Falls has got all these weakness points. The teacher sort of even the teacher sort of at the end of it, the schools, he's an educator, but clearly he's closer to a real teacher. Doesn't really care. Wants to go home for the holidays and stuff. Looking to be a real scientist rather than a teacher. In the bank, you got, like say Gerald, played by Judge Reinhold, and then Mrs. Deagle and Mr. Futterman, who out and out racist, who seems weirdly they bring him back, but should have brought American. Don't buy that foreign muck, all that kind of stuff. This is a town that sort of, because of this negativity, was open to this, and so the Gremlins sort of like represent. You can read it in many different ways. The sort of the other or the world fight, natural resources fighting back. But to me, I see it as this sort of like they are the evil and the vices of things that sort of like can sneak their way in and when things get worse. Like the door has been opened for them and they can get their way in, and it basically just kicks your ass. So again, it's another anti-commercialism and anti-capitalism film. Less said about sort of like Kate's. You get the story at the middle about how her father died. Less said about that, the better. It's weirdly off-putting. I mean, it sort of works, but the pacing in that moment's a bit cack. But, okay, the story is impacted by the events taking place at Christmas. Oh, yes. Like, he is given Gizmo as a present for Christmas. That's the point. But also the fact is that, all these people are hunkering down. It's snowing, which has an impact on the story. So, it being at Christmas is actually relatively important. A lesson must be learned that makes someone in the film a better person. Well, actually, I think Billy learns a lesson. He learns responsibility throughout this film about taking things seriously and actually looking up. Again, it's sort of this thing, another thing that comes through these Christmas films is this idea of looking around you and experiencing the world rather than looking down. And I think that's actually really important in this. I think Mrs. Deagle also learns a lesson in that you can't fly out of a window on a stair chair. So that's a good one. The positivity of Christmas iconography must play a part in the story. Positivity of Christmas iconography. Probably a bit of a push, actually. I mean, Gizmo has a Santa hat on at one point. There's not a great deal. She gets attacked by a Christmas tree. That's not very positive. It's a tough one. Do you know what? This is a bit of a toughie, actually. Does Christmas iconography play? There's Christmas music, actually, is a big part of it. That's another thing that distracts the Gremlins and helps. Goes to the cinema. I'm trying to think, really. Christmas iconography. Oh, okay. I suppose because again this is the anti thing. I suppose it's for positivity. People learn their lesson. They do come in as Christmas carolers and some other bits as well. And again, it ends in a department store. Again, this anti-commercialism, this capitalism idea of like fighting in the department store. So it's there. I think it is there. It's a bit of a push. But Gremlins from 1984, wonderful film, absolutely wonderful. Love that film so much. And I actually am one of the few people I think that I really enjoy the strangely meta and madcap sequel. We'll cover that one day on the podcast. But number one, we're there, ladies and gentlemen. I've probably sort of skipped through a few of these because I've just been looking at the time. But now we are there. We're at number one. What is my number one alternative Christmas movie? And does it fit the rules? Well, strap in, ladies and gentlemen. I must say, welcome to the party. Because yes, at number one is 1988's Die Hard. So let's just get straight down to it. Let's run through this because everyone knows the story. John McClane, and got invited to the Christmas party by mistake. Who knew? We all know the film. We all know the story. So what I want to ask is it a Christmas film? Let's clarify this once and for all. So stick with me on this one because this is going to be a bumpy ride. Does it need to take place at Christmas, or does it, having taken place at Christmas, impact the story? So the story is impacted by the events taking place at Christmas. Yes. Christmas is the reason John is coming home or coming to LA. It wouldn't have happened at any other time of the year because of his relationship with Holly. So he's coming home. He's not coming home because he lives in New York, but he's coming from New York to LA to see Holly and the children before Christmas. This again comes into this idea we'll come into later on about the values of Christmas and spending time with the family. Like he's coming, he brings the big bloody bear and all this other stuff. Like he's coming home, he's coming to LA to spend time with them for Christmas. Like he wouldn't have done this any other time. Like he has to have an excuse. He has to have a justification. Also, the thing about Christmas is it sort of informs the experience or the way we experience the relationship between John, Holly, and the kids. This film is about family reunions, and it's this weird thing of like, weirdly, the events of Die Hard make that family reunion a sweeter experience, because we get a glimpse of what it could have been, okay, in the start of the film. We'll come on to it in a minute. Also, Hans Gruber's plan requires it to be Christmas, because all the floors are empty apart from the Christmas party. And so I said this is the second Christmas party on the list, but he needs that Christmas party to be taking place because everyone's grouped together, and also the key people are there whilst the rest of the building's being empty. So Christmas party is crucial to this film. Number 1 ticked. Okay, right, now this thing about the lessons learned, and I'm actually going to throw something in here. So let's think about someone who's a bit of a grouch, thinks they're right all the time, and by the end of this scenario, by the end of it, Christmas Eve night as this is, engaging with some darker forces, becomes a better person at the end of it. That's what this story is. You might guess where I'm going with this. So when Bruce, or John, I should say, let's say call him John. When John arrives at Nakatomi Tower, you've already seen that he's still cocky and self-assured, and he still is in that macho position, thinking he was right. He was in the better position than Holly. Like, he should have been listened to. And so what you get is, at the beginning of the film, you actually get a scene where, Holly, speaking with her maid, says, set up the bed. But, just in case, because it may be that he's going to sleep over, he's sitting out in a hotel, so... And she's already done it. So in her head, there is a reconciliation possibility. Like, this could be a positive Christmas experience. That's what she's planning out in her head. Like, she's thought about this. Holly's thought about this. As women often are more planned ahead than men. But when John arrives, that first encounter with her, he sours it by being a prick. Like, even he acknowledges it, after it's happened. But this thing of like, he has a dig about the office, about the smarmy git whose name escapes me, who's doing drugs in her office and that sort of thing. So he comes in with the wrong attitude and he ballses it up. So it's actually these events of Christmas that teach John the importance of family. He's like, oh yeah, at the end of this, he's like, oh yeah, no, I really appreciate you guys and things. We're going to go past that because I actually do think that there is an element of a Christmas Carol in this film. So, John going through the trials in the tower is like Scrooge meeting with the three ghosts, finally facing up to his possible death and a chance of living with his new wife. So this happens a bit throughout the film, and I'm going to say there's other bits, but these are the key ones. I'm just throwing a couple out there. So past, how does he face up to his past? Well, there's a great scene, obviously, when it's all gone to tits, and he sort of he has to explain why he and Holly live separately to Al. We get to see a glimpse of the path that's been taken there, and the jealousy that came from that. And it's alluded to throughout this film, but when things have gone pear-shaped, you get the nods to the past. But in particular, when he confesses to Al about how he and Holly, well, he actually says it to Argyle. Argyle already gives him that thing, sort of like, he sort of says, oh yeah, she got a better job, and then he actually calls him on it and says, oh, and you thought she wouldn't make it and she'd come crawling back to you, So his facing up to his past continually happens through that. Al has to do it as well, so Al sort of like travels with him through this sort of journey. He's like his Rizzo the Rat, as to Gonzo in Muppets Christmas Carol. But Al has to confess about why he's a desk jockey, so he confesses about killing that kid by accident, and then having to overcome that in the final scene. So he even gets like a bit of a redemption. Present, John doesn't quite get this, but we get it as a viewer. So it's an odd one because I think it's there intentionally in that way, but we get to see when the reporter, the dickhead reporter, goes to the family and asks the kids, they go, come home. It's that thing of like, what's going on in the present? How are people living their lives outside of this scenario that are important to John? Like, this is having an impact, and so we get to see that as a thing, but also like Hans gets to see it, and so it plays differently, but it's definitely there as a present. It's giving you a glimpse into the present of what's going on and what John could have. Future. So what happens in the future? So obviously with Christmas Carol, he faces up to his death. He literally gets shown his death. That's what Scrooge gets. But in this, John McClane, has to face up to his death. So when his feet are all cut up and he's in that bathroom and he thinks he's done for, and he's on the radio to Al, and he's sort of, he gives her a message. He says, when this is all done, find my wife, tell her that I'm sorry, tell her that I love her. And his attitude at this point has changed. Like, he's gone through the shit now, and he's like, look, I'm not going to make this. And Al has to convince him, like, yeah, man, you're going to make this. You're going to tell her that yourself. And so it's cool. I love that. Like, that's him faking up to death. And as he comes through this moment, like, he comes through battered and bruised and everything, but that's his revelation moment, that moment of like, I've got to get through this, because he could just give up and lie there in the bathroom, and it's at that point when he sort of asks the question, like, what were you doing? What were you doing up there, Hans? And anyway, so yeah, I think you've got that. You got your past, present, and future. So it really taps into this thing. So let's say, does he learn a lesson? Yes. So by the end of this film, like, he truly values his family. That opportunity, that thing of it being taken away, but not just them being taken away, but his opportunity to reconcile with them was almost taken away. And him being shown that possibility of them without him, what it really truly means is him willing to have that sort of positive reconciliation with Holly and his children. So the events on a Christmas Eve have a positive impact on him. So definitely learns a lesson. Also, the villains are focused on money over ideology. And again, there's this anti-capitalism and anti-money. It starts off with this idea that they're ideological terrorists, release these people, the New Dawn, and they make that sort of joke. You sort of saw them on 60 Minutes, and you think it's about an ideology. It's about them getting their brothers out and sisters out of prison. It's not. It's about accessing the bank. So you get this I'm always going to put this as a Christmas thing, like anti-money, anti-commercialism. Weirdly, they are the villains because they're after money. When even Holly Gennaro says at the end, like, you're nothing more than a thief, petty thief. And he says, I'm a great thief, Miss Gennaro. So yeah, and that obviously, you can then focus in on the miserliness or the money focus of Scrooge. Again, another anti-money story. So while terrorism is awful, doing it for a cause can be seen as committing these acts. It can be. Terrorism is awful, but doing it for money can be seen as worse. If you know what I mean. If you believe in something, it can almost go, well, yeah, they're nuts, but they're doing it for an ideology. Doing it for money, you think, well, that's just greed. As for the positivity of Christmas, so that moment when he has his realization and you're about to go to the last thing, and he looks at the 2 bullets in his hand, and it's like, this is it. He looks over and he sees that tape with the image of Santa on. And so this image, and again, it makes him smile and it gives him that bit of ray of hope. And I've always read that moment. Like, he gets the idea, the inspiration of what he's going to do. Like, it could just have been parcel tape, but it's not. It's Christmas tape, and that's really important. And that's how he tapes the gun to his back, and he goes for that sort of like final moment. But also you've had the sort of like, now I have a machine gun, ho ho ho. You've seen other Christmas sort of decorations throughout the film, but I think those 2 moments, his humour is he levitates his humour through iconography of Christmas. He puts the Christmas hat on the dead terrorist, and ho ho ho. Like, that is key to me. That he's keeping his spirits up and sort of antagonising them. So that's the positivity of Christmas iconography. Is that a stretch? What do you think? But I definitely think the tape is an important one at the end of this film. And the other thing to learn from this film, the other thing to mention is, like, most films, like you can see something like, let's talk about Home Alone. The lessons aren't learned because they literally repeat the same lessons in the next film. The lessons stick with this film. Yes, the second film is a bit of a replay of this, but at an airport. But the fact of the matter is, like, it's no longer, oh, I've got to save him because it's the wrong guy at the wrong place at the wrong time, which it sort of is, because that's actually the tagline. But he's actually more on the offensive. Like, he could have easily walked away, but he's there actually to save his wife. And they are together. They're constantly communicating and doing better and talking about things and about her her mum, so his mother-in-law and other stuff. So the lessons have been learnt from this first film. It's not that they just dropped. They're gone by the third film, which is a bit later, but that's, neither here nor there. But they are learnt from the first to the second film. That's important. And so I honestly think going through that and looking at that. So let's just go run the rules again. The story is impacted by the events taking place at Christmas. Yes, because it resounds, it resonates, and it's the whole purpose of why John is coming back to LA or coming to LA to see his family. It's important that this film taking place at Christmas because he is coming back for a family Christmas and a reconciliation. Is a lesson learnt that makes this one a better film based on Christmas values? Yes. It's all about family, this film. It's all about family. He comes in and he ruins that first reconciliation moment by being the macho dickhead that he is. And in doing so, thinking that she's the one that should be, it's not so much misogynistic. It is a bit. But that she's ahead of him. There's clearly a jealousy there and a bit of macho misogynism going on. But he reconciles himself with that and he comes to terms with it throughout this film to think that I love her and I actually, just being with her and the kids is more important. And so surviving is the point of this film, but surviving for family. So definitely a Christmas value. The positivity of Christmas iconography must play a part in the story. He gets the inspiration for what he's going to do because of the Christmas tape. I stand by that. So I have my 3 rules and I feel I've answered them. So ladies and gentlemen, we have it right there. It is definitive. I never want to hear about this again. Die Hard from 1988, starring Bruce Willis, is indeed a Christmas film. It is a positive film. I have been able to link it to A Christmas Carol, and I have had it on the same been able to talk about it on the same list and on the same podcast as It's a Wonderful Life. So all of that together means that it is most definitely a Christmas film. So there we are. I've given you 10 films. I've talked about my proper Christmas films and my alternative Christmas films. I would say Die Hard is an alternative Christmas film because a lot of people die in it. It's not one to be sharing with the kids, but it's still great. So go out and watch this film. Just a quick recap. So what have I said? I said my favourite top 5 Christmas films: The Santa Claus, It's a Wonderful Life, Arthur Christmas, Home Alone 2 and Scrooge. Not in that order, I've just read them quickly. And my alternatives ones: Santa's Sleigh, definitely watch that, it's really fun. Office Christmas Party, hilarious. And then Krampus, excellent film. Gremlins, and of course, what we've just talked about, Die Hard. Do you agree with my list? Do you agree with my reasoning? Am I miles off? Do you disagree that Die Hard is not a Christmas... Do you disagree? Do you think Die Hard isn't a Christmas film? Well, screw you, I don't care, because it is. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it. There'll be one more show out this year. It's going to be a short one. Let's call it a year in the recap. Probably going to be very short. There's not a great deal to recap. It's been a bit of a shit year, let's be honest. But I hope you have a wonderful, fantastic Christmas and that your families and yourselves stay safe. You get the presents that you want and deserve, and that you do not come face to face with the Krampus. If you want to talk to me, though, over the Christmas period, I will still be available. You can contact me through the website. That's 20thcenturygeek.com. Or you can contact me directly through email, 20thcenturygeek@gmail.com. Or come find me on the Twitters and all the social medias. Just look for 20th Century Geek. That's at 20th Century Geek on Twitter. That's where I usually am. Come find me and let me know what you think of your favourite Christmas films. Or my Christmas films. What are yours? What ones did you throw in? But if you want to support us, the other thing is we've also been keeping up the Christmas themes. I'm looking at Christmas and horror for the Patreon this month, and that'll be coming out very, very soon. But go and check it. We have a Patreon page. We do all kinds of stuff over there. There's going to be more stuff coming to Patreon in 2021, and we're going to be making it all a big thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And before the end of the year, I'll see you again soon.